Throughout my time talking about President Trump, I've generally been pretty positive. There have been, however, times where I have disagreed with the president, such as when he bombed Syria 2 years in a row, or his lack of progress on immigration enforcement. However, just yesterday, Trump did something that I never expected he would do. It was revealed that he's planning to issue an executive order instructing the federal government to change how it interprets the 14th Amendment and stop the process known as birthright citizenship. As we'll get into in the fourth section of today's video, this is a completely legal thing for him to do, and if he does it, it will be a great thing for the country. Immediately, this news was met with incredulous cries of "Orange Man bad" from the left, and schwitzing from many that call themselves conservatives. There is a lot of disinformation out there on both sides about birthright citizenship, so in this video, we're going to cut through it and look directly at the facts, and look at the constitutional history of how we got to the place we're at now. Throughout this video, we're going to explore 4 essential questions about birthright citizenship. Number 1, what is birthright citizenship and where did it come from? Number 2, which countries have it and why do we have it? Number 3, what effects does birthright citizenship have on our country and on our politics? And question number 4, can Trump legally put an end to birthright citizenship by executive order? I've actually been surprised with the amount of conservatives and libertarians that I've seen this morning with their hair on fire on social media, absolutely shocked and appalled at Trump for daring to issue this executive order. I'm going to explain to you the strategy at play here, so you'll actually know the legal machinations that are going to take place after Trump issues this EO. The history of birthright citizenship and the need to get rid of it, all of that ahead in today's video, but first, a new browser game I think you'll enjoy. I haven't really played strategy games for years, and with so much on the market now, it can be hard to know.
It's a game I think you'll enjoy. Check it out today. All right, and now on to the big BC, birthright citizenship. First, let's do a little refresher on what exactly birthright citizenship is. Birthright citizenship, or just solely, is the right of anyone born within the United States or U.S. territories under U.S. jurisdiction to be a United States citizen. It doesn't matter where your parents are from, their legal status, their nationality, none of that matters. As long as you exit the womb within the confines of our legal jurisdiction, you get an American birth certificate and the full suite of American rights. It's hard to think of a scenario in which this arrangement makes sense. Even in the 1700s and 1800s, before the introduction and reinterpretation of our 14th constitutional amendment, citizenship was automatically granted to children born in the U.S. to American parents. If you and your husband or wife were Americans, you wouldn't have to go through the process of getting your newborn child naturalized as an American. So that's what birthright citizenship is: the right of every child born in America, regardless of their parents' citizenship or legal status, to be a United States citizen. Which begs the question, why do we have it, and is this a common legal practice? Well, no. In fact, the United States and Canada are the only 2 developed nations in the world that currently issue birthright citizenship. European countries are significantly more strict. For example, in France, at least one parent must be a French citizen in order for their child to obtain French citizenship. So why are we alone in the world on this one? Why do we have the weakest, most exploitable citizenship laws of any developed nation? We weren't supposed to be. Actually, the 14th Amendment, which has been interpreted to automatically give citizenship to the children of foreign nationals and illegal aliens, was never intended for that purpose. The 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868, shortly following the American Civil War. The purpose of the 14th Amendment was to extend rights to former slaves that were now free men. There are several clauses in the 14th Amendment that you may be familiar with, including the Due Process Clause, the Equal Protection Clause, but you probably haven't heard as much about the Citizenship Clause. Here's what it says, quote, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." Well, case closed, right? All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens? Not exactly. As Edward Earler points out in National Review, the inclusion of the phrase "and subject to the jurisdiction thereof" is very important and essential to understanding what the 14th Amendment was supposed to do. As Earler writes, quote, "Thus, there are 2 components to American citizenship: birth or naturalization in the U.S., and being subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. Today, we somehow have come to believe that anyone born within the geographical limits of the U.S. is automatically subject to its jurisdiction. But this renders the jurisdiction clause utterly superfluous. If this had been the intention of the framers of the 14th Amendment, presumably they would have said simply that all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. are thereby citizens. He continues, quote, "Indeed, during the debate over the amendment, Senator Jacob Jacob Howard, the author of the Citizenship Clause, attempted to assure skeptical colleagues that the language was not intended to make Indians citizens of the United States. Indians, Howard conceded, were born within the nation's geographical limits, but he steadfastly maintained that they were not subject to its jurisdiction because they owed allegiance to their tribes, and not to the U.S. Senator Lyman Trumbull, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, supported this view, arguing that subject to the jurisdiction thereof meant not owing allegiance to anybody else and being subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States. Not owing allegiance to anybody else and being subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States. That is a problem for proponents of birthright citizenship. Let's say your parents are Mexican citizens and they're in the U.S. illegally, and you are born then to Mexican parents in the U.S. Per the Mexican nationality law, you are automatically a Mexican citizen because you were born abroad of Mexican parents. So by virtue of the fact that your parents have Mexican citizenship and not American citizenship, you are automatically a Mexican citizen, and your allegiance is to Mexico, not to the US. This is the understanding that the framers of the Citizenship Clause intended. They intended this amendment to apply to the children of freed slaves, which is why it was included in the 14th Amendment along with other provisions that dealt with post-slavery issues. Illegal migration was not really an issue in the 1860s, and it certainly wasn't on the forefront of the minds of the framers of the 14th Amendment. And based on what the authors of this clause said at the time, including Jacob Howard, we know it was never intended to apply to the children of foreign nationals. In fact, Senator Jacob Howard said it even more explicitly than this in the debates about the 14th Amendment. He said, referencing the Constitution clause, quote, "This will not, of course, include persons born in the U.S. who are foreigners, aliens, who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers accredited to the government of the U.S., but will include every other class of persons." The Citizenship Clause was never supposed to include the children of foreign nationals. It was never designed to allow for foreigners to practice birth tourism, where they come here, have their child here, and then exploit our chain migration system to bring their entire family into the U.S. According to the authors of this law, none of them are supposed to become citizens in the first place. And that brings us to our third point. What effect is birthright citizenship having on the United States? Birthright citizenship is one of the many problems with our immigration system, but birthright citizenship, combined with the 1965 Immigration Act, have been instrumental in reshaping America's demographics and political culture. From 1790 through 1965, America was approximately 85 to 90% European American. But after 1965, the demographic transformation of our country began. We've gone from being an 85% European American country in 1965 to an approximately 60 to 65 European American country today. From 85% European to 65% European in just 50 years. Do you ever wonder why our country looks more like Honduras or El Salvador than the classic Americana of the 1940s and 50s? Well, you can thank changing demographics for that. We have less in common with our fellow Americans than ever before. Our cultures are different, our customs are different, and in many cases, especially in big cities, our languages are completely different. All of this is partially due to birthright citizenship, which has changed being an American from something with meaning and identity to nothing more than a piece of paper you get for happening to be born on the right side of the border. I've gone through the stats a million times, but we know that the majority of non-white Americans support eliminating free speech, eliminating the right to keep and bear arms, and a larger, more expansive welfare state. Whites are the only group that, on average, oppose these things. And thanks to America's changing demographics, the state of Texas, yes, deep red Texas, will be a permanently blue state by the year 2024 or 2028. And when that happens, Republicans will no longer have any chance of ever again winning a presidential election. It sounds extreme, but that's electoral politics. It's predicted that European Americans will be a minority in the U.S. by the year 2045. What do you think is going to happen to quality of life in the U.S. at that point? Will America 2045 resemble the America as we know, or will it resemble the type of failed state that people flee from to come here en masse? This is why it's so important that we get serious about questions of immigration restriction, and birthright citizenship is a key part of that. Now, for the final question. Is this constitutional? I've seen a lot of sadly misinformed conservatives repeating the conservative take, which is that Trump is wrong to do this because it violates my Constitution. That's not true, and Trump is illegally in the right to issue this executive order. I'll explain why. To understand why, we first have to look back to an 1898 Supreme Court case titled U.S. versus Wong Kim Ark. In the 30 years between 1868 and 1898, children born to foreign parents in the U.S. were not assumed to have U.S. citizenship. That's because the 14th Amendment was, in most places, being interpreted as the founders intended, as applying to freed slaves, but not foreign nationals that were temporarily residing in the U.S. In fact, in the 1884 Court case Elk versus Wilkins, the Supreme Court affirmed that Native Americans born on a reservation did not acquire U.S. citizenship because they were not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And then, in 1898, came the Wong Kim Ark case, where the Supreme Court ruled that because Mr. Ark had been given citizenship at birth, he would be allowed to remain a citizen. Of course, this case was decided over 100 years ago, when the American understanding of immigration was fundamentally different from what it is today. This was before the distinction between legal immigrants, illegal aliens, and temporary residents was established. This was before the advent of the modern American legal immigration system. Trump isn't rewriting the Constitution via executive order. He's issuing an executive order he knows will be struck down by a lower court. And once it's been struck down by a lower court, Trump and the federal government can appeal that decision to the Supreme Court. And there, birthright citizenship will be ruled on by the highest court in the land for the first time in over 100 years. That's the point of this EO. We've seen this very administration employ the same strategy with the so-called Muslim ban that was just ruled on by the Supreme Court recently. They ruled in Trump's favor and ruled that the ban was allowed to take place. So is what Trump is doing legal? Yeah, it's completely legal. Will the courts rule in his favor? Well, we'll have to wait and see. But I have a feeling that with the balance of the Supreme Court the way it is, and the current court's deference towards interpreting the Constitution as intended by the framers, there's a good chance that Trump's EO will be upheld. But again, we'll have to wait and see. A few things are for certain, though. Ending birthright citizenship would be a great thing for the country. It will make it so that American citizenship means something again, and isn't just handed out to anyone born in the right place at the right time. We'll join with the rest of the developed world in once again making our nationality mean something. And we will slow down the growing leftist takeover of this country. The majority of those that benefit from birthright citizenship will grow up to reject the First Amendment, reject the Second Amendment, reject the idea of a small government, and they'll demand a larger socialist-style, Venezuela-style government. And they'll vote for it when they have the chance. But we never voted for this transformation. The American people were never asked, do you want to become a multiracial, multi-ethnic, socialist failed state? These immigration policy changes occurred without Americans really being aware of what was going on. And now that we are, it's time that we step in and stop it.